University, and we've got this really neat wall of wind that is doing a lot of good research, and we use modeling for different things we're doing. This affects different things that are going on in the state, so it's a great backdrop here. I am here to provide some updates on some of the major issues that are facing Florida, particularly with respect to insurance. I think we all have lived through the last 4 years and seen the cost of everything really go up. Groceries are more expensive than ever. Housing is more expensive than ever. Auto insurance was the #1 inflationary item nationwide in 2024. Average increase was 20%. And then, of course, property insurance has been going up nationwide, but that's been an issue that's roiled the state of Florida, being hurricane prone for many decades. And so I'm pleased to announce that very soon, Citizens Property Insurance will be announcing that 73% of Miami-Dade primary homeowners will receive a premium decrease in 2025. And the average decrease for those Citizen policyholders will be 6.3%, which you figure 2024, we had inflation in 2024 overall, and it's accelerated at the end of 2024. So even if you just kept things normal, you'd likely see increases in a lot of these things. And yet, for Miami-Dade, 73% of those Citizen policyholders will receive a decrease, average of 6.3%. 52% of Citizens homeowners in Broward County will also be receiving a decrease, and that'll be an average of 4.5%. So overall, statewide, most of the decreases are concentrated in South Florida, but overall, a decrease will be merited for over 20% of Citizens policyholders statewide. So we appreciate Citizens doing that. I'm proud to be able to make that announcement today, and that's something that's very, very meaningful. Can also announce that the major companies who provide auto insurance in the state of Florida are also going to be providing premium decreases for 2025. So far the filings are as follows. Geico, 10.5% decrease statewide for auto insurance. Progressive, 8.1% decrease statewide for auto insurance. And State Farm, 6% decrease statewide for auto insurance. And we have others that are going to be doing things very soon. So we anticipate to see decreases for USAA and maybe some other companies as well. And then finally, there was just a report put out by S&P Global on homeowners insurance nationwide for 2024. And Florida had the lowest premium increases in homeowners insurance in 2024 out of all 50 states based on their analysis. Now, that just shows you this insurance issue is not limited to Florida. Like a lot of times people will focus because we've had issues for the last, couple decades, but then also it's like we do so well in all these other things. We're paying down state debt, we have a big surplus, we're cutting taxes, education, low crime, all these things. And so they got to find something, right? So they do. But nationwide, 49 other states had higher average premium increases than Florida did in 2024. And January rate filing so far, if you look at the last 30 days as these companies file the rates that they're going to do, the average increase for property insurance rates over the last 30 days was simply 0.2%. So almost zero that we've seen over the past 30 days. If you look at the 180-day average right now for January 2025, the average increase was 1.1%. And if you compare that, a couple years ago, you were seeing average increases like 20%. And so you've seen a stabilization. You also have 11 new companies have entered the market in the state of Florida over the last 2 years. California, that's not happening, and other states, it's not happening. You see companies that are leaving. You're never going to have a stable market if people don't want to come in and do business here. So we said we got to have a stable market. We got to fix some of the things. We can't control storms. We can't control inflation nationwide. There's a lot of things that are beyond our control, but providing a solid marketplace is one. And what happens is, if some company's overcharging you, if you have 4 others to choose from that can give you a better deal, you choose it, and then people vote with their feet, and there's a competition for your business. If you're in a place like we were years ago, where you may not have any option, well, they raise it, what can you do? You have no other option to be able to do. So I really, really think it's good that we've had 11 companies come in. And so I think the upshot of all this is not something that just happened. The legislature here in Florida has done more to address these issues over the last many years than any time in the history of the state of Florida. You know, there'll be major things that are done, and sometimes people act like none of this has happened. The reality is, when you're dealing with a complex market, you can't just do something and all of a sudden flip a switch and problem is solved, because there's so many factors that go into this. But just think about what's been done over the last 6 years. 2019, the legislature passed and I signed HB 7065. What that did was it addressed this, really it turned into a cottage industry of assignment of benefits. And so you have an insurance policy, you make a claim, you want to get the claim paid. Assignment of benefits, a third party would come in, they'd ask you to assign the claim for them, and they would do litigation and they would try to run up the costs and do whatever they can to benefit themselves. Well, that's not something that's going to be good if you want to have stable or lower premiums. That's going to help drive the cost up. And so we were able to do that. The legislature did that. And that had a modest effect on one very small aspect of how Florida's market was not doing well. Then in 2021, the legislature passed HSB 76. What that did was it tightened the eligibility for citizens. I mean, some people shouldn't be on citizens. You want to make sure it's focused as insurer of last resort, but particularly for lower and middle income people and not for upper income people. It also tightened the deadline to file claims from 3 years to 2 years. And the reason is you know, you had Hurricane Irma, you'd go through the aftermath of that, and people thought the market was stable a year, 18 months after. And then you still have all the litigation claims happen years after the fact. It was hard. Businesses didn't want to come into the market if they thought they had a never-ending 3-year period where you could have a lot of this litigation. And so that was a modest change as well. Then in 2022, you saw really significant reforms passed by the Florida legislature. First one was eliminating this roofer scam. You know, you would have situations where people would go, there'd be a shingle on the roof, and they'd say, oh, assign me your claim and I'll get you a whole new roof. It'd end up in litigation, it increased. That's not what insurance is for. So of course, that's going to cause premiums to go up. It's going to cause costs to go up. And so doing that really eliminated something that was negatively impacting the market. And there would be neighborhoods where people would knock on doors, say, they didn't even have a storm or anything, and say, hey, I can get you a new roof, I can get you a new roof, sign on the dotted line, do this, do that. That was a scam. And that's not how you have a healthy market. Companies did not want to come to Florida because they wanted to, they didn't want to have to be dealing with that. We also created a temporary reinsurance to assist policyholders, RAP. At that time in 22, the reinsurance market was out of control. This is a global market. It's not something Florida certainly can control. It's something that is impacted by things like the California wildfires and those devastating losses. So we wanted to make sure that if there was needed to be a backstop, that we were providing funding where companies could go, get some coverage, but then ultimately pay us back. I'm happy to say that really wasn't necessary ultimately for most of these companies. We still got $2 billion in my budget that I have under this for reserves. We don't anticipate having to use that. The reinsurance rates in 2024 were basically stable. I don't think it went up at all, maybe less than 1%. It went down. Reinsurance rates actually went down. So there wasn't a need to do this, but we wanted to have a backstop. And as you know, we have a lot of different things in Florida. We have a cat fund. We have things that are different than other states, just given the risks that we face. Then after the 2022 elections, there was major reform to take one of the biggest disincentives from businesses wanting to come to Florida and enter this market out of, and that was doing what's called one-way attorney's fees. So one-way attorney's fee is if I sue you and I win, you pay me my attorney's fees. But if I sue you and you win, I don't have to pay you attorney's fees. That creates an incentive to litigate rather than have settlements and have claims adjudicated in a way that is less cost effective. So we were one of, if not the only state in the country that had a statute like that, and that was a big driver of the cost of insurance here. And when this reform passed, Florida represented 8% of homeowners insurance claims nationwide, but accounted for 78% of litigation expenses. The interesting thing about that in 21-22, the majority of those litigation expenses, Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, which incidentally really haven't been affected in any major way by hurricanes. I know Dade got a little bit on Irma, but by and large, you know, it's been probably almost 20 years since you've had major impact here in Dade County, and yet they were driving the insurance. So where is all this damage coming from if you didn't have, and it was because you were doing the attorney's fees, and it was all about giving the lawyers money rather than the actual policyholders. And there were some examples where lawyers are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars and the policyholders getting like 50 grand or something. How is that something that makes a lot of sense? And so that was a major reform. They also did things like clarify and make clear what bad faith claims were. They also made sure that citizens' property insurance holders, if a private carrier had a comparable policy, that the private carrier can take that policy out. And the reason is Citizens ultimately is backed by the taxpayers. If there was a major event that Citizens couldn't pay, in Florida law, Citizens has the authority to assess every single policy in Florida, non-citizens policy. So you may have renter's insurance, and they could assess your renter's insurance. You could have auto insurance. They could assess that. You could have private homeowners insurance. They could assess that. So Floridians who are not a part of Citizens could potentially get whacked if Citizens is not something that's stable. So what you've seen is people that have qualified have been taken out. I think 2024, there was, what, 450,000 plus that went from Citizens to a private market. Incidentally, between, I think, about 25 to 40% of those takeouts in the private market actually had lower rates, which is surprising because people thought the rates would be a lot. So they were comparable. Some were higher, some were lower, but the market is much healthier as a result of doing that. We also we tried to use all the tools at the disposal, and the legislature was generous in authorizing and then expanding this program called My Safe Florida Home. And what it does is it allows citizens who, primary residents, not the mansions, but you know, middle-class people and lower, to get grants to be able to make improvements that will harden their homes and be more resilient in the face of these big weather events. And when people do that, more often than not, they get a decrease in their insurance premiums. It's also ultimately good for them to be able to do. So we've put through thousands of people on that. We did a big push this current fiscal year. A lot of people got the grants, but we've got people on the wait list. You know, we just did this special session. A lot of it was focused on immigration. I wanted to do the hurricane My Safe Florida Home Relief, and anybody that's on the waiting list, we wanted to get that funded so that they can make improvements to their home in time for this coming hurricane season. So I think that's something that's really good. But that's a program, given the market turmoil, given the inflation we were seeing, given everything that was going on, we wanted to do. And so we've dedicated really significant resources to be able to provide that lifeline to Floridians all across the state. We've also beefed up in that bill in 2022. We've beefed up that that we've limited the time that an insurance company has to cancel your policy. You know, at the end of the day, we want to have a good market. We don't want excessive litigations, but we want these companies to do what they're supposed to do. We don't want them gaming the system. We don't want them to be able to strategically drop people. So that's a much tighter window. We've also given regulators the ability to examine insurance companies' compliance in a real way with teeth. They can enhance punitive capabilities. We have more reporting requirements, and we've prohibited executives of impaired or insolvent companies from receiving bonuses or other golden parachutes. I mean, sometimes these companies go out and these guys come out with all this money. So you're not allowed to do that anymore. So you have seen real significant reforms to bolster consumer transparency for consumers, and that's what we want. If somebody has damage and they're insured against it, we want a quick resolution and payment of the claim. If you didn't have storm damage, we don't want some lawyer coming, getting your claim and filing frivolous litigation either. And so you got to make sure that you're having a strong market, but that you have the transparency so you can hold companies accountable. And when companies run afoul of this, if you have 11 new businesses coming and you have 3 or 4 options, these bad actors, not only can they be held accountable punitively, but then people are going to want to drop that and they're going to want to go to other businesses. So that's where you are. So people are now looking at this in Florida and saying that Florida's market has stabilized. Compare California. Insurers are leaving California. They're fleeing. They don't want to be there because the government's policies have been very, very destructive. Who knows what's going to happen after these fires? There's certain things you can't control, but there's certain things that you can mitigate. If you look at Florida, our building codes have mitigated damage throughout hurricanes. In the most recent hurricanes, Ian, Idalia, and then the 2 we had this year, you could just look to see the newer construction, how that fared compared to some of the older construction. They can handle major hurricanes in a really, really good way. We've also done things to mitigate with our emergency response. We have Kevin Guthrie here, Division of Emergency Management. So there's things that you can do. We've added resiliency to some of our key infrastructure. Private sector has done that with the substations. There's a whole host of things that you can do that are within your control that can mitigate. Ultimately, we can't say, we're not going to have a hurricane or we can stop a hurricane. As much as the media wants to act like, if you just say magic words, you will not have hurricanes. That's a lie. That's not true. California, though, they've had horrible forest management practices. We do controlled burns in Florida all the time. They don't do it. They really fall prey to ideology. They haven't let the water come the way it has. And so they've increased the risk of these major fires doing major damage. I think what we've done in Florida is we've taken action to mitigate the risk of these major tropical weather events, and that's a really, really good thing. So right now, Florida has 7.58 million active homeowners insurance policies. That's 130,000 more than the previous year. I mean, the media will sometimes say nobody will write insurance in Florida. That's just not true. The data doesn't show that. I know there may be some people that want to build mansions on places that are kind of, right there on the ocean that someone may not want to insure, but for rank and file folks, we have an increase of 130,000 policies. As I mentioned, 11 new companies have either entered the market or expanded their presence here. That is a sign that businesses have confidence in putting capital in Florida at risk in ways that they're not willing to do in California or many other states. I mean, if you look at that S&P Global map where Florida had the lowest premium increases of all 50 states, there's some states that had major increases, and companies are totally fleeing those states. The opposite is happening here in the state of Florida. And I think those fires, you're going to see even more problems. But 5 states in 24 had increases in premium of more than 20% last year. That was not true in Florida. That was true in 5 states. And 2/3 of the states are reporting double-digit weighted average rate increases. Again, for 24, Florida is not one of those states. And the only reason we're not one of those states, we're not immune to inflation, we're not immune to all that, is because the legislature has done a number of major reforms over the last many years. More attention has been paid on this issue over the last 4 or 5 years than has ever been paid to it in the history of Florida by a country mile, not even close. It doesn't get to fanfare. You can't do these things and they're going to automatically make a difference right away. It takes time for the market to adjust. That's why I think the bill that passed at the end of 2022, we knew in 23 it just wasn't going to be enough time in the system to see major dip, but we hoped in 24 that you would see really, really significant stability. And I think the fact that you saw no increases in 24, or the lowest increases in the country, that is a testament to the legislature doing these reforms. So you really, really appreciate it. So last year, our statewide, if you look at all the policies that were filed by carriers, the average increase was 1% in 2024 throughout the state of Florida. Now, some people got decreases. Well, actually, a lot of people did. You know, you're probably not getting a 30%, but people are getting, and then there are some that get increases, and there are some that, you know, may have a tough time getting it if you're in a real danger zone. But that's something that I think no one 3 or 4 years ago would have predicted, that Florida would be at 1% and that 11 companies were coming in. People were saying the whole market was going to capsize. They said we weren't going to have any private insurance in the entire state of Florida. And keep in mind, flood insurance is almost all the National Flood Insurance Program, which is controlled by Congress and regulated by the federal government. So if you look at what happened with Helene, and to a lesser, even Milton, a lot of those claims are actually not homeowners insurance claims, they're flood claims. They're different policies, and it's frustrating, but that's just the way this is developed. So if somebody's roof is fine and exterior is fine, but you have 6 inches, 8 inches of water that seeps in, you'd have to make a claim under the National Flood Insurance Policy. Congress has made a mess of that. There's a huge amount of problems with that. So hopefully they're going to be able to address it in a way that's going to benefit Floridians. So the takeouts, I mentioned Citizens. So you have the big reductions. 73% of Dade County policyholders that have Citizens are going to see a reduction. Average is 5.5%. Broward, over 50% of those will see a reduction. Even Palm Beach is close to 20% of their Citizen policies are going to see a reduction in the upcoming year for the rates. But ultimately, you want to have a private market that has a lot of competition, that's transparent, and that serves the interest of homeowners. In 2022, we probably had, did we have 2 million on Citizens? Certainly over 1.5 million. It was a lot. You only had 16,000 policies that were returned to the private sector. 2024, you had almost 500,000 policies go from Citizens to the private sector. And so Citizens has the lowest population it's had in probably 5 or 6 years, I would imagine, which is good. On the auto insurance, some of the reason you're seeing that in Florida, auto insurance went up, I think, on average nationwide 20% last year. Part of that is the inflation. Part of that is the supply chain disruption and the lag from that, from COVID. But part of that is the fact that cars are more like computers now rather than cars like when we were growing up. You know, and honestly, I actually don't want some of this stuff in cars. I mean, what's wrong with just turning the key in there? Why are they always gadgets and monitoring you and everything like that? I mean, I'm sorry. Like, I don't really need. But the reality is if you have a fender bender, whatever they're doing is probably going to cost a heck of a lot more than what would have happened 20 years ago, even adjusted for inflation. So there's a lot of things going on with that. Florida drivers are interesting. I think we all know that, being here in Southern Florida. I really, I don't know how you fix that. I mean, we're working on it. But you are now seeing, though, with the Geico filing for 10.5% decrease on average for their policies, Progressive 8.1% decrease in State Farm, and you have new insurers entering the car insurance market in Florida too that want to be a part of it. Part of it is the legislature also smartly addressed some of the scams that were going on in auto insurance. They repealed assignment of benefits for auto glass repairs, which became a cottage industry, and they did the one-way attorney fees in the tort reform that they did in 2023. And so you have seen a big drop in the number of lawsuits that have been filed. And here's the thing, lawsuits cost money. If a company has to defend lawsuits that are unmeritorious, that's basically a dead weight cost. I mean, it's one thing if they have to defend it because they did something wrong, that they should have to do that. They should have to pay that. But if you're just doing kind of jackpot justice, if you know that it costs $250,000 to defend a case and that you can settle for $100,000 and the lawyer gets half of that, it creates a cottage industry, and that's not good incentives. But those costs will be passed on to consumers. those costs are not just going to come out of the company. They're going to pass it on to you. So this, what the legislature did, has brought in stability. And now that people know our market is more aligned with what most other states do, you're seeing people willing to write more policies here. And that just means more choices for you and an ability to do this. So I want to thank the legislature for working hard on these. Are very, very complex issues. These are private markets. This is not controlled by the state of Florida. The flood insurance is basically controlled by the federal government, but your homeowner's policy and your auto insurance policy is a private market. These companies are going to respond to incentives. If you do bad things like in California, they leave the state. If you do sound policy, they're more interested in coming to the state and offering to do business here and offering consumers choice, which is what we're seeing in the state of Florida. I do want to make another note, though, about this My Safe Florida Home program. Before next hurricane season, I would love to get everybody off the wait list who is now on the wait list. They're approved. I would love to get them their awards, their grants, so that they can make improvements on their homes over the next 6-7 months, so that as we get into, look, hurricane season's June till the end of November, but the reality is, once you start getting into mid-late July, August is always September, October. I mean, those are the high times. If we can have people get those repairs done, that will help them weather potential storms. Now, knock on wood, hopefully we don't get one this year. We had 10 years where we didn't have any from 2006 until 2016. Then we now had a series of years where we've had them. So we'll deal with what we have to deal with. I will say this, though. The My Safe Florida Home program has been effective. People have gotten, not everybody gets it, but a lot of people get reductions in their premiums when they can show that their home has been fortified. So that's very, very good. But I also know this, 2025, looking at the horizon, most of the carriers are looking at the market. They're saying Florida's made a lot of very good reforms. I think they can do similar or even reductions in terms of the premiums if they're confident that the market rules are going to remain the way they are for a long time going forward. So I think you gotta keep this in place, let people know this is what's going to be done. And I think we have an opportunity to bring in even more companies and give consumers more options to have more manageable rates. Now, we're not only focusing on the rates, we also do want to do these mitigation discounts. The best defense against damage from bad weather and natural disasters is mitigation preparation before an event even occurs. That's why we've encouraged homeowners to harden their properties against inclement weather through various tax holidays and incentive programs. Home hardening protects your property from potential damage, but also increases its resilience and reduces repair and replacement costs in the event of a disaster, and it will save you money in the long run. So this year, we're expanding programs through the Office of Insurance Regulation to utilize the facility here at FIU, the Wall of Wind, to conduct modeling and testing of new roofing materials and wind-driven water intrusion protections for condos. Once this research is complete, savings can be required by your insurer. I know Commissioner Jaworski will have more to share on this. They're not just cost-saving measures, of course, they're also life-saving measures, because if your home is hardened, that may make the difference for you. So I'm glad with all the stuff that's been so costly for families, and we've worked hard in Florida to mitigate it. I mean, we've done toll relief for commuters, we've done sales tax holidays, we eliminated all tax permanently on baby items because we know how much it costs to raise young kids. On and on it. We've held the line on college tuition. We've not allowed a single cent tuition increase since I've been governor. So here at FIU, if you're a Florida resident, I think it's about $6,300 to attend. You can't beat that anywhere else in the country, I can tell you that. And then we fully fund Bright Future scholarships so that if you are a good performing student, you likely can get 100% of the tuition taken care of, or even 75%. So we've worked hard across the board where we can make a difference in the state to mitigate some of the things we've been seeing. Obviously, grocery prices, you've seen home prices. Now, some of it is property's more valuable in Florida because there's a demand to live here. People had to flee the COVID insanity in other states to come here. They had to flee rioting to come here because we know, these Hamas protesters in Miami, they tried to take over the street. The cops yanked their ass off the street in like 10 minutes. I mean, we're just not putting up with it. So people want to be safe. They want to be able to have school choice. They want to be able to have a lot of this stuff. So the demand has definitely caused home values to go up in part. But you also have high interest rates. You do have inflation in housing. Even though we've done programs like Live Local that spurred more production of individual units, particularly for workforce housing, you still have a crunch. You still haven't seen major reductions after seeing the housing spike, apartment rent, all this stuff spike for many, many years. Then you have the insurance for auto, which we're thankful we're seeing decreases now, but that has gone up. And then the homeowner's insurance, even though we were stable last year, that's a huge chunk of people's mortgage. I mean, if you look at the taxes and the insurance, and then the principal, it used to be the principal was a lot higher than the other two. And that's not just limited to Florida. That's a trend we're seeing all across the country. So doing really tough reforms in a complicated market with limited ability to influence it, the legislature's been able to address this over many years, and I think that's why you're able to announce things like the rate reductions for Miami-Dade County. That's why you're able to announce some of those things. I also do think, though, in Florida, and this is not something we can do just through legislation, given that this is considered a local issue under Florida's Constitution, but we need to limit even further property tax rates. We should be tripling the homestead exemption to make sure that our primary homeowners are protected from this. And some of these local governments, some of them do a pretty good job, but some of them waste your money. And I would rather protect you and limit their ability to tax your property. I mean, if you were starting a community in a country from scratch, you would never want to tax property and land. It's like ultimately, you buy a house, you own the land, but you got to pay the government for the courtesy of just being able to exercise your property rights. Not really a good thing. And so we do have the homestead. It's effective to a certain extent, but I think it needs to be much better. So we may be working with the legislature to see, is there some things that we can get to be put on the ballot so that voters have an opportunity to rein in the costs associated with property taxes and to give further protections for Florida taxpayers. I think that would be really good, and I think that would be a great thing to leave to future generations. So thank you for being here to hear the announcement about the rate reductions for South Florida and the auto reduction statewide. We're going to hear from some other folks that have been involved in these issues very deeply, and then we'll take some questions. So we're going to have the Commissioner for the Office of Insurance Regulation, Jason Yaworski.
Thank you, Governor. I have to say and begin by saying that the governor's leadership in this space has been nothing short of profound. The reality is that as he entered office, the market was already entering a downward spin, and he immediately stepped into action as he outlined the series of reforms that he worked with the legislature to bring forward. And we finally got the one thing done that we thought we would never get done, which was the repeal of the one-way attorney fee statute. That is restoring rationality to our litigation space and moving us in a direction where we can have a sustainable insurance market over time. We spoke about a number of things in addition to the citizens rate reduction that the governor announced today. That's really the latest sign in a long list of signs of market stability that is emerging throughout our state. In 2024, I approved over 70 rate decreases or rate freezes for all our insurance companies operating within our bounds, affecting millions of consumers, which will roll on to policies at renewal as that takes place. We're truly seeing good news emerge on every front. We're seeing litigation rates decrease upwards of 30% throughout the state. So the reforms are working. It does take time for consumers to truly feel all of those effects and the impacts, and to a degree we're fighting against inflation and other economic factors that we cannot avoid, but we're seeing good news. And as we move forward, as the governor said, we're not stopping there. The office, in conjunction with other state agencies like DEM, are thinking of ways to improve the market further. One of those key areas is mitigation and working to ensure that consumers are getting the very most credit possible that is actuarially sound for the features that exist on their home. And that includes everything from the roof type that they have, to the barriers on doors that they have, to the type of asphalt shingle or metal roof or whatever it might be. We want to make sure the consumers are getting the credit for that, and that is recognized, and they are getting what they want. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. All right, Kevin Guthrie, Division of Emergency Management.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Governor, for having me here today. Thank you for continuing to provide sound leadership for the state of Florida as Florida continues to see improvements in the Florida insurance market. As a state's emergency manager, I can say that a big part of success is investing in our communities, whether that's through insurance or other mitigation programs. You might think FDM is just the hurricane response agency, but we also work year-round on mitigation efforts throughout the state to make sure that we're learning lessons about lessening the impacts of future storms, which reflects positively in our state's insurance market. At FDEM, we manage more mitigation funding than any other state agency combined. Today, we are managing over $4.8 billion with a B dollars in mitigation funding. While we have a lot of that available to cities and counties, we want to make sure that homeowners know that they can be a part of that mitigation success. We're going to be announcing some more mitigation activities here in the next couple of weeks and months, but truly want homeowners to understand, for every dollar that you invest in hardening your home, putting a better roof on it, Mike and I are really, really big on metal roofs. Metal roofs do a lot to save the envelope of the home. Every dollar that you invest is going to have a return on that investment of at least $6. And it's higher if you're the coastal community. There are some studies that say actually even up to $36 on a $1 investment is what you see. So we want to encourage people to take a part of the state and federal mitigation programs that we have that come post-disasters. This, as I said, this funding helps communities through critical infrastructure, utility mitigation, drainage, generator, and again, the residential parts. Through additional programs we oversee, like the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, we have executed more than $210 million in projects statewide since 2020 that reduce or eliminate long-term risk to people and property, with more projects implemented each year. And we just had a significant investment that we'll be announcing at a future date that FEMA has given us additional funding in the Flood Mitigation Assistance and SWIFT current programs. All projects together, the modern Florida Building Code is estimated to have saved more than $1 billion in damage to single-family homes alone just in Southeast Florida and Southwest Florida during Hurricanes Irma and Ian. We are here today at the Florida Wall of Wind, where a lot of those things came to fruition over time. I was just here, I think, 3 weeks ago with you guys as I got to see some of the projects that are being undertaken right now. And I'm not a spokesperson for FIU, but I am an adjunct professor for FIU, I will say that. So I guess quasi I'm a little bit of a spokesperson. So people from all over the world come to this facility to test their products. So not only are we leading here in Florida with this wall of wind and the mitigation activities and how wind affects the water, which then affects condos, as the governor mentioned. We're also investing in the youth, and the Wall of Wind Challenge is going to be taking place here in a couple of months, and we're excited to see what students in STEM programs are going to be bringing into the industry in the years and decades to come. So I'm happy to be an adjunct president of FIU and get to participate in the groundbreaking activity that goes on here at the Wall of Wind. We will continue to implement common sense, research-supported projects that harden homes and critical infrastructure against future storms. Governor, as always, thank you for having me with you. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to lead the division, and thank you for your leadership.
Senator Broder.
Thank you very much, Governor. My name is Jason Broder, and it's a pleasure to be here representing the Florida Senate on behalf of President Albritton. We know the cost of property insurance is posing a major affordability problem for our fellow Floridians, and we want every homeowner to have property insurance that's both reliable and affordable. When disaster strikes, we want to make sure Floridians can successfully navigate the claims process and rebuild in a way that's efficient and quick. A healthy insurance market, as we've noted, gives us a wider array of consumer options, as well as bringing in that competition that drives down prices and allows us to have greater coverage options. In recent years, due primarily to excess litigation, as you've heard, the legislature and our great governor has taken many steps to curtail some of the bad activity that's led to our market. We know that Florida's legislature and the governor took aggressive action to solve these things, most notably in 2023 when we talked about those major legal reforms and consumer protections that we put on the books. It's an honor to stand here today with our governor to share with Floridians how these reforms are working. It's been a lot of work, and it's a major step in the right direction. We're seeing new insurers and new private capital enter the market. These rates are stabilizing, they're leveling out, and they're finally starting to come down in places like here in South Florida. Pro-consumer transparency requirements are protecting homeowners, and when insurance companies fail, there are consequences. Just last summer, Commissioner Jaworski fined a company $1 million. We know the positive momentum we are seeing across the market as a whole is taking a while to reach kitchen tables. And so that's why every little bit helps. And with the legislature and the governor's leadership, one of the things he didn't mention was the tax relief of $500 million that we have for policyholders on taxes on on insurance, property insurance premiums. This is an important tax cut for families that are trying to make it while our insurance market strengthens. We want to make sure Floridians know that as our insurance market stabilizes, we are closely watching to make sure that claims are being paid. Floridians have been faithfully paying their premiums for years, in many cases decades. And when disaster strikes, they expect their insurance companies to hold up their end of the bargain. And so again, it's great to be here today on behalf of the Senate to mark these important developments in our insurance market. Thank you very much, Governor.
Okay. Rep. Buchanan.
Thank you, Governor. It's a pleasure to be with you all today with some of these great announcements that we've all heard. If you were to ask me, I've served in the Florida legislature and the Florida House for the last 6 years, collectively, over that period of time, what the number one subject matter as it relates to calls that we received, it's been insurance related. In 2023, after we passed those reforms, I was asked at a town hall, how will we know if the measures that were passed are working? And I simply responded, you're going to see it when your rates plateau and eventually are reduced. That's when we'll know that what we have done in terms of reforms are beginning to work. We're beginning to see that. I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of high volume agents that work in the space, and they've shared with me over the last year, there's been many instances with their customers where they had a difficult time finding a single private sector company that was willing to insure them. I've had a conversation with them more recently, and many of these same agents have since told me that there are now multiple private sector options available. So the free markets are in the state of Florida beginning to work. People are beginning to see their premiums go down. And I did hear the governor mention earlier about reducing property taxes. Governor, you'll be happy to know last year I ran the HJR that was put on the ballot that would index your homestead exemption to inflation, because inflation, as the governor has said, has been a runaway issue for the entire country. So every year inflation goes up, it's going to offset your property taxes. I did have a second HJR that didn't make it to the end that would have doubled the non-school levy portion of the homestead exemption. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Good job. Well, thanks to the legislators. Yeah, I forgot. You know, we did do that major tax cut on the insurance taxes. It's that I think they're supposed to put on your statement that what we did, but a lot of people probably don't even know. But you did save marginally because of what we did. And then I'm proposing in this year's budget for the upcoming fiscal year to do a holiday on the intangible tax on mortgages up to $500,000 of principal. We think that'll save consumers close to home buyers close to $200 million. And again, interest rates I hope will go down, we're in a situation where home prices skyrocketed, not just in Florida, but around the country. Interest rates had been low, then they went up, and people are kind of locked in their homes. Like, people don't want to move and then if they have a mortgage that's low, they don't want to move and then have to pay a mortgage, because like the amount you'll pay monthly is like double, even if it's the same size with how, but so we're working on that. But there's a lot of different things that hopefully we're going to start to see relief that are beyond the control of the state government in Florida. But it would sure be good to see reduction in interest rates. It sure would be good to see a reduction in inflation. Inflation really accelerated towards the end of 2024. People thought it was going to peter out. Remember, they said 4 years ago it was transitory, and it hasn't been. So hopefully we'll start to see that generally, because an insurance market, whether it's auto, property, or others, ultimately that's a reflection on the underlying cost of things. And so if nationally cost of things can moderate and go down, and we can get back to where we were several years ago, I think all these other things will also benefit as well. Okay, well, thanks so much. We'll take some questions. Yes, ma'am.
One on topic, one off, if you've got the time.
Okay.
On topic, what we hear over the past couple of years of reforms, with the market definitely showing improvement, the actual customers are telling us, aside from unaffordability, they wonder why insurers aren't made to not cherry pick. In other words, auto insurers don't really have to insure for a windstorm in Florida. Why not ask of the market and beef up the market that way by making insurers, if you're going to insure in Florida, insure everything for customers?
Do you want to talk to that first?
Thank you. That's a great question. The first thing I would say is that there is a requirement under Florida law that if you are writing auto in this state and you offer property in other states, you must offer property in this state. But also, we've seen the results of that in other states. We've actually seen that effort underway. We see it underway recently in California, where it ultimately fails. Ultimately, companies make decisions based on their economic best interests and what they can sustain. And if the math doesn't add up actuarially, they're not going to move in that direction where they're going to provide coverage for either. And so it can be a really bad path to go down for a state where you fight against the free market and the market to what we're trying to do is coalesce a market that builds a resiliency where there's competition. And if a company does decide to non-renew someone, there's 7 more companies lining up. And that's really the biggest driver, is that free market incentive to keep companies here.
And we had, like USAA is a good example. I mean, I've been USAA since I was in the military. Now, the good thing about them, I mean, I remember my wife, we had one of the storms, this was before I was governor, take out her car. We had a payment for it like 3 days later. It was very quick. And so, like, when you see that as a customer, you're loyal to the company because, like, they actually wanted to make the payment. They weren't trying to get out of it. They actually did it. So they're very well known for auto insurance, and you got to have military connection to qualify. But what they've been doing now in Florida, not because of mandates, they are expanding their homeowners insurance policies. And in fact, I saw some of these guys at the Army-Navy game because USA sponsors it, and they're like, we're being thorough about this, but we are expanding in Florida because of what the legislative reforms that have been enacted. And so I think it's creating the best market conditions is ultimately going to be best for consumers. Some people say, well, California, they're like saying that this company can't do this company can't do that. Look, if I could just say, or the legislature could enact, you can't charge more than $10 a month for homeowners policy, and the companies would do it and it would work, I would do that in a second. But we know that's not what would work. They would stop doing business here, they'd pull out, and then we'd be left basically with taxpayers having to foot the bill. And my view is, especially as people who are upper income, live in a little bit more risky areas, have more expensive homes, that clearly is not something that the taxpayers should do. That should be the homeowner, particularly in those high income areas. So, but I think the market quality is ultimately what's going to lead to the most options to consumers. Now, as Jason said, I mean, we actually do have some of these requirements, but I don't think that's why you're seeing expanded coverage. I think it's because of market conditions. Off topic?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Wouldn't be a press conference without you asking an off-topic question. So
You're okay with that, though.
I am.
Which is one of the reasons we love you. So here in South Florida, this morning in the Federal Register, it was official that TPS for Venezuelans on the 2023 TPS round is canceled. Significant number of them are here. A significant number of them are your supporters of President Trump, very active in the Republican Party, really counting on being protected. And I wonder if you would weigh in on why them, and what do you tell your constituents there?
Well, a couple things. One, the people that voted for me are not on TPS. They are U.S. citizens. They have every right to be voting. And it's no different than someone that came on the Mayflower. Like, once you're a citizen of this country, you have the same rights as everyone, whether you're newly naturalized or whether you go back, 10 generations. And so, yes, we have very strong Venezuelan American community. I think they see a lot of things similar to how I do and President Trump does, because they've seen leftist oppression up close. Their friends and family have seen it up close. Venezuela used to be a very affluent country, and then Chavez wrecked it. And now you got a current situation, which is still very bad. So that's separate. TPS was abused by Biden. It's not a question of, do you like this person or not? He did not have the authority to do it under those circumstances. That is, he was giving TPS saying, come here. That's not what it was for. So I think President Trump is getting the law right. He's going to get control over who is in this country. You cannot have a situation where people are just pouring in willy-nilly. I called the special session of the legislature. They were in last week. I made my feelings known about what I thought of that product. But the good news is we are working together. I think we're going to have a really strong product that's going to help bolster the Trump administration's efforts to just enforce immigration laws, ensure we're removing the people that don't have a right to be here, and that we're doing that effectively. And then what's happened at the border, you've seen a big decline in crossings. We've been engaged in the boats. Remember, everyone was saying like a year or two ago, we were going to be overrun by boats from Haiti because of all the problems that were happening. Guess what? We're working with the Coast Guard, interdiction, we've got great radar, and we've been able to snuff that out. We've had very few relative to what was predicted of people coming. So I think this is just an issue that look, if you're a U.S. citizen and you come from another country and you're naturalized, you're every bit as American as anybody else. But just coming without process or without legality, that has got to end. We just have to stop that.
Can I just follow up on that, if I may?
Let me do one. Do we have anybody else first? Back there? Yes, sir.
Back on insurance, Governor. Citizens had a very sizable rate request filed last year. What did you and the commissioners see in that rate request that didn't look right or didn't seem right to you?
Well, look, I mean, ultimately, they're governed. There's a board. I do appoint the board, but they make these judgments based on the facts in front of them. I think what's happened is I just think the market conditions have improved. Our view is that especially in southeast Florida, that given that you really haven't had many storms here, that it's not just good because we want people to pay less. Obviously we do, but it's justifiable to say that those rates should go down. And so I'm glad they've evaluated it this way. I'm glad they're able to announce. I mean, to have if we were here just 2 years ago and someone said they were going to be able to do 73% of the Dade, and Dade County is very citizens heavy. The Dade County citizens policies would be a decrease of average of 6+%. People would have said that's not going to happen based on what was going on at the time. So I think it's good. I think the depopulation of citizens has been good. Ultimately, I know there's some people that just say, that you should just put everyone on citizens, but understand that would be a massive financial risk for the state, and it would expose every Floridian who has any insurance policy to potentially assessments that you would not have any say over. They could just assess. I mean, just imagine you are here, you don't want to buy a home because you don't want to deal with whatever, so you rent and you buy renter's insurance, and all of a sudden you get an assessment from Citizens Insurance on a private rental insurance agreement that Citizens has nothing to do with. What the medicine in there with Citizens is really, really strong. We absolutely want to avoid that. So I think the takeouts have been good. Some people's rates from Citizen to private, have gone up modestly within a certain window. I mean, they can't charge you 100% of what you had in Citizens. There's guardrails. But the fact that probably a third of people that got taken out of Citizens got rate decreases with a private carrier, that is really, really positive, because then the risk is on the private business. The risk is no longer on the state of Florida and policyholders who have nothing to do with Citizens. And then the policyholders even paying less. So that's win-win-win when that can happen. So we're optimistic that that's been good. But I'm really glad that Citizens going to be able to deliver decreases for Miami-Dade and Broward, the majority of rate holder policyholders in both counties, and supermajority in Miami-Dade, and even Palm Beach. You're seeing a lot of Citizens policies that are going to have decreases. So 20% statewide, but 73% here in Miami-Dade. Yes. Okay.
So in My Safe Florida Home hardening process, is there any component of that program that mandates insurers do the decreases for the hardening? In other words, if a home is hardened and definitely better against the storm, why not mandate that the insurer show that as a decrease?
So, great question, and the answer to that is yes, there is a requirement. So all the improvements that can be made under the My Safe Florida Home program comport to OIR's corresponding windstorm mitigation form. And so automatically there's a mandatory requirement in law that if homeowners have made those improvements to their home, that they get the corresponding decrease that's affiliated with it across a broad matrix of various mitigation techniques you can use. So that is a requirement under Florida law now, and we are monitoring to make sure that companies are in fact implementing those credits as they are issued.
And as I mentioned in my earlier comments, we had this program, the legislature reestablished it at my request. It's been popular. We have put serious money behind it. It's not like we're just putting, a few $1 million. I mean, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. We've probably done over $1 billion, right, in the last few years. So it's real. I do think the savings are going to far outstrip that, and it's just giving people part of the grant that they're having to pay some of it too. It's not like it's just a government doing it, but we have people on the wait list. So we had the program authorized for this fiscal year. Hugely popular. People are doing it. They're getting inspections. We submitted a lot of grants. Hundreds of millions of dollars went out the door on the grants. But we have other people that were approved, and there's no more money in the program that's been appropriated. They're on the wait list, and they're waiting, and they basically have been told, you qualify, you've had the inspection, so if they get the grant sooner rather than later, they can make the improvements in time for hurricane season, and especially in the areas where people got affected by Milton and by Helene. If they're having to rebuild some stuff anyways, and they already qualified for My Safe Florida Home, why don't we get them that grant money so that as part of the rebuilding you can do? So that was why I included that on the call in the special session for last week. Now, the legislature did not take up that call to do the My Safe Florida Home, but my view is if you're going to do it and you have people on the wait list, you might as well do it now, put the funding out there, because if they wait and put it in the actual budget, the funding's not even going to be available till July 1st. So good luck in getting that done in time for the height of hurricane season. You're already in hurricane season by July 1st. So I really hope we can clear the wait list, at least clear the wait list in the areas that were affected by these storms, because I think the value add to that can be tremendous given what those folks have gone through. But yes, there is a requirement that insurers take that into account. People have gotten decreases. Also understand, we can do something that will help mitigate an increase, and sometimes someone's rates would have gone up 10%, instead they go up 5% because you did that. So there is still a downward pressure whether the overall rate is a net reduction or not, because there's so many other factors that are at play here when you're talking about all these different rates. So, well, listen, we're going to keep working, but I think this idea that sometimes people say that the legislature has not done a lot on this, or that we haven't in the executive, that we've never had a period in Florida history where more attention was paid to the issues of both homeowners insurance and auto insurance. There's some people that don't like some of the things that were done because there were people that benefited off the old system. You know, mostly people, you know, that were trial lawyers that would benefit. They're not benefiting as much, but I think consumers are benefiting by seeing the market stabilize. And then, of course, here in Miami-Dade County for 25, you're seeing, you know, reductions in rates for Citizens property insurance. So what we're going to continue to do, I spoke with, I've been speaking with some of the reps and senators, and if there's additional things that can make a difference, we won't hesitate to do it. The legislature will act. They'll have my support. But what is not on the table is unwinding any of the things that have allowed us to get to this point where we can actually announce that Citizens is doing a decrease, where we can actually announce that the big companies for auto insurance are decreasing rates, where we can actually announce that S&P Global said that of all 50 states, Florida's increases in homeowners insurance for 24 was the lowest of all 50 states. Who would have thought that just a couple years ago? Final thing I'll say, these insurance issues are not Florida only. You're seeing insurers flee other states in the Midwest, California, you name it. You're seeing really stiff increases in different parts of the country. And I think part of that is driven by what the federal government has done in recent years. And so we've got a new crew in town, both in the Congress, having the Senate. You also have the Trump administration. So my hope is that we see some positive action to help address inflation overall, spending levels, all this stuff, but certainly making sure that we have a viable insurance markets, not just here in Florida, but throughout the United States. Thanks, everybody. God bless.